Hi, my name is Tanner Stratford, and this will be my presentation on UML component diagrams. Alright, so what is a UML component diagram? Well, there's this article called UML Basics, the component diagram, and it's written by Donald Bell. He says that the component diagram's main purpose is to show the structural relationships between the components of a system, and that in component-based development, component diagrams offer architects a natural format to begin modeling a solution. Component diagrams allow an architect to verify that a system's required functionality is being implemented by components, thus ensuring that the eventual systems will be acceptable. Alright, so how could we use this in our own application? So using a fairly simple example, we can apply the UML component diagram to our application. I just made this small example here. In this example, we can see that we have a user login component, which once verified will be redirected to the calendar view, and the calendar will read the events from the events database and the events from the Canvas API, and it'll display those events on the corresponding dates. From there, we see that there's a navigation component that'll redirect to a page that adds events, or it can also go back to the schedule. Now obviously this doesn't cover every component of the app. I kind of just wanted to show a simple example of how we would create this component diagram. However, we can see that it is very useful. Like I said before, this is a simple example, but it's really helpful to visualize how beneficial it can be to visually represent how different components of the application will come together. Alright, so what are the upsides to the UML component diagram? As it says in the quote, component diagrams are useful communication tools for various groups. The diagrams can be presented to key project stakeholders and implementation staff. While component diagrams are generally geared towards the system implementation staff, component diagrams can generally put stakeholders at ease because the diagram presents an early understanding of the overall system that is being built. So having this early understanding of the overall system that's being built to show to stakeholders is a powerful tool because it's able to bridge the gap of uncertainty early on in the development process. With component diagrams, it's helpful for both developers and stakeholders to have an idea of how everything will fit together, and it solidifies some expectations from the program. So something else that Bell said was that developers find the component diagram useful because it provides them with a high-level architectural view of the system that they'll be building, which helps developers begin formalizing a roadmap for the implementation and to make decisions about task assignments and/or needed skill enhancements. As system administrators find component diagrams useful because they get an early view of the logical software components that will be running on their systems. And now that we've covered the upsides, what are some downsides of the UML component diagram? Well, as it says in the slide, a downside to the component diagram is that in simple systems, it will probably often be the case that a component depends both on the interface itself and on an implementation thereof. However, this constitutes a bad design practice. So in essence, there may be downsides to a component diagram in the sense that it may be confusing which components depend on what, but as long as good design practices are being used, it should not pose too much of an issue. Alright, so for the recommendations, my recommendation comes from the prevailing upsides to downsides. A UML component diagram is useful very early on in the process of designing our application, so making one will be critical in informing stakeholders of what our plans are for the different design components of the program. There are many benefits of making UML component diagram, and as long as we adhere to good design practices, there should not be any issues that we encounter. Well, at least not any that we shouldn't be able to fix or overcome. Alright, and this concludes my presentation. Like I said, my name is Tanner Stratford, and this was a presentation on UML component diagrams.